Hello everybody, I'm Alexy Khrabrov, the head of committee at Lake Sale, and here we are at the GOSIM Paris, and with us we have Sir Timothy Gowers, who is a professor at Collège de France and University of Cambridge, and he keynoted this conference, and so he's a field medal winner in mathematics and in combinatorics. It's really exciting. I went to math school in Moscow. One of my classmates, Igor Pak, is a well-known combinatorics scientist. So I'm not, I love mathematics, but never, worked at this amazing level. So it's really exciting, and all AI is math, right? It's all matrices all the way down. So it's really exciting to have Timothy with us. And can you tell us a little bit about how you came here and what you talked about in your keynote?
Yes, I came here because I've got an invitation, and although I'm a mathematician, I'm also very interested in automatic theorem proving, and I have a group in Cambridge devoted to automatic theorem proving. That's to say, just trying to get computers to do mathematics. But our focus is a little bit different from a lot of what's going on in that domain. So a lot of what's happening is what you might just call prompt engineering. So you're giving problems to language models to solve, and if you get the prompts right, so they're getting better and better at solving them. But we are interested in really understanding in a more fundamental way how human beings solve problems. It's a very mysterious question, because we know that it shouldn't, in some sense, it shouldn't be possible. If you have a general mathematical statement and you ask, does this statement have a proof? That's actually halting complete. There's no algorithm that can tell whether, in a sense, there's no algorithm that can do mathematics in general. But we can do mathematics, and that's because we don't do general mathematics, we do sort of interesting mathematics.
Right.
So we're trying to understand what it is about the interesting mathematics that makes it possible for human mathematicians with their rather limited resources to be able to come up with complicated proofs.
Right.
And we hope that by understanding that, we'll be able to teach AI to do it better.
Right.
And so, as a result of that, I have an interest in what's going on in AI. And so coming to somewhere like GOSIM is a good way to meet people and find out what other people are thinking about in the more AI domain. So.
Thank you. It really struck me, one thing in your keynote, right? So I went to this best math school in Soviet Union because, and I should have studied history. I like history. I really like humanities. I'm not very good at math. I'm okay at math, but now I'm a better programmer. So, but there was no other path for people to do something real because, all the humanities were Marxist, Leninist. So, and I thought that math is very antisocial. When I read math books, they rubbed me the wrong way because effectively they provide very dense statements, and then there is an answer, and in between there is a phrase like, as an exercise to the reader, or it easily follows that, and there is nothing like it's followed easily, right? And so I thought that I'm dumb, I don't understand it. But then you said that this is basically a wrong way for people to understand math, and you said that LLMs, they should do math, basically became antisocial and mean this way because mathematicians write books this way from which LLMs are written. And so suddenly it just occurred to me that math could have been different. It could have been more humane, and you also said that you're interested not in achieving the result, but you want to see how a mathematician arrived at that result. That was very interesting to me. Can you explain a little bit, how do you go about it?
Yes, just before I get onto that, I think something very important happened in the beginning of the 20th century, which was putting mathematics on a rigorous footing, developing the axioms, the ZF axioms, and formalizing what we meant by rigorously what we meant by a mathematical proof, and so on. But unfortunately, I think that development, though it was extremely important for mathematics and a very positive development in many ways, had a slightly unfortunate stylistic consequence that people then tried to write in this kind of formal logical style.
Dry.
Yeah, which sort of lost, something was lost in that process, or something to do with the human process.
They look like computers. They want to be machines.
Yeah, exactly. So how does one counteract that? I mean, actually, I've been trying to counteract that throughout my career, long before anything to do with AI or automatic theorem proving, just by really examining carefully how I myself come up with proofs, or thinking about things that I was taught when I was a student, that I just accepted the proofs, and then sort of thinking, actually, how could somebody have thought of that argument? And sometimes if I thought hard enough about it, I realized, actually, often after teaching it myself, I would suddenly see something that would make me realize, oh yes, that's probably how that was, or how that could have been discovered. And so for me, there's always been quite a strong link between a really good way of explaining mathematics to humans and a really good way of explaining mathematics to computers. What I hope is that, I don't think we have this at the moment, but I'm hoping that sometime in the future we will be able to teach computers to think about mathematics in a more human way, so that they will then be able to explain to us in a better way what they've been doing. So at the moment, they've copied a style that they see in textbooks, and they just give us the answers, basically.
Right.
And sometimes that's not what you want. Sometimes you want.
This is fascinating, right? Because I vividly remember. So when I went to School 57, which was the most famous math school in Soviet Union, so a lot of our graduates, basically like Igor, like the professors of math in famous places, and the other half became oligarchs and they're all retired because they're very good at computers. But so we had this series of exams. So basically, the class. The math class was filled progressively. First, the half of the people who attended the evening courses, and then a quarter, and so you have to pass exams. So, and I remember that. So I read some book on the numbers theory. So Soviet Union had this amazing math books, right? And so basically, I was supposed to explain something, and I thought that I kind of mechanically memorized a lot of mathematical formulas, and so the guy was looking at me. I was explaining some inference, but I mechanically memorized it. I didn't understand the underlying math. I just kind of memorized how the proof goes, and then I forgot midway, and basically I did all the steps except the final step. And the guy looked at me smiling, as like expecting me to just normally explain what follows, because I followed mechanically. I looked at him with horror, and I realized that I forgot the next step, and because I never understood the whole thing. I couldn't do it, and so it just struck me that some people really understand it, and some people mechanically follow this, and I couldn't do it, and then basically it made me think I don't really get mathematics, but that's probably because the way it was explained was very mechanical and not explaining it to me myself.
Yeah, it's an interesting measure of the level of understanding of, say, a proof in mathematics. How much you can actually compress it.
Yes.
So. The lowest level of understanding, you just have to learn each line and what comes in. But if you have a better level of understanding, you might have sort of 5 ideas. That if you do this, and getting to that idea is a fairly standard calculation, and then you get to this by a fairly standard calculation. But then you have to remember those 5 ideas.
Yes.
And maybe you understand it better, then you actually see there's only one idea, and those 5 ideas were natural.
Yes.
And then maybe at some point you reach the point where just the whole thing, you're doing what feels like the obvious thing, and that's when you've reached the sort of ultimate understanding of the proof.
But to me it was, a lot of it is like when you do integration, a lot of it is mechanical movement of parts of formulas around. And so you can remember the mechanics of doing it, but not the underlying principle. And so I think a lot of people will do mathematical transformations as just some kind of mechanical movements, right? And they will not, and I think a lot of school children do this.
Yeah, I've seen that with my own children, actually. Everything seems to be fine, and then they suddenly make some bizarre mistake, and then I realize that
there's no understanding.
The reason it seemed fine was just because they'd learned the manipulations very well, and but if they got sort of out of distribution, so to speak, then suddenly it fell apart.
I want to kind of zoom in on the formal methods. So I had a friend who was in formal methods in 1993, working with a computer company, right? And so it seems like a very, very kind of stagnant little academic niche, right? And so there were people, they had the formal method conferences, and they went there, but they were not connected to the real world, right? So the first time I've seen a talk about formal methods actually being practical was Leslie Lamport. We gave a talk at a computer conference, and TLA Plus, and he mentioned how the Amazon DynamoDB team used TLA Plus to basically formally prove that it's a correct implementation, right? But now then I've seen this whole rise of Lean in conjunction with, and people basically want to model the world now with Lean and prove things about it, and apparently it does work in math. So I'm just curious, like, do you see this? Is this a breakthrough for formal methods?
I think it's certainly a breakthrough of one kind. I mean, it's we're seeing the story always used to be that by and large, mathematicians they didn't really need this extra guarantee of correctness, because if something was important, it would be read by a lot of people.
Right.
If it was incorrect, usually there'd be small mistakes, but if there were serious mistakes, somebody would at some point realize that. And if it wasn't important, then who cares? But two things have changed, and also the other side of the story was that the effort needed to write down a completely formal proof in a proof assistant such as Isabelle or Coq or Mizar or Lean, which came in a bit later, was so great and so much greater than just writing out the usual style of proof that it just wasn't worth it. So two things have changed, I think. One is that conventional proofs have become more and more complicated, to the point where there is genuine worry about their correctness, and the too many proofs come out.
Like Fermat's theorem, it took a long time to show that it's correct. Sorry.
On the other side, as Lean has developed, and people have built more and more tools and added more and more to MathLib that you can then use, the barrier to entry to formalizing has gone down and down, and we find that undergraduates can formalize deep bits of mathematics, which they don't even necessarily have to understand very well, as long as they can just cover it line by line.
Right.
So things have changed a lot, and there's now a big sort of thriving Lean community. So I think one could call that maybe not a breakthrough exactly, because there wasn't really a conceptual change. It's just more like a sort of phase transition seems to have taken place. And a further phase transition seems to be about to take place, which will be that auto-formalization will get sufficiently good that people will be able to formalize without even bothering to learn Lean. The vibe formalization, so
right,
to speak.
vibe formalization.
And so that means that, one immediate change will be, I think, that instead of journals sending articles out to referees to check the proofs, we'll just get computers to check proofs. And so then the only remaining job of journals will be judging whether something's interesting or not.
Do you think it will ever happen that you don't need a human in the loop? That this vibe proofing will actually be good enough?
I do think that will happen.
Okay.
I don't know how long it'll take, but I think that is the end.
So fully
game.
automatic proof
Yeah.
that you will be comfortable with.
Oh, that's a slightly different question, whether I'm comfortable with it. No,
Will you ever accept something that the computer said is correct? And
I see.
Yeah, because you're an editor of this journal. You send a submission to a Lean verifier, and it came back saying this is correct. Will you be now comfortable publishing this?
If I judge it to be interesting enough, then I'd be. I'd be at least as comfortable. In fact, probably a lot more comfortable judging it to be correct if it had been verified in Lean.
Yes.
Than if I just sent it out to a referee who probably didn't read it very carefully.
Right. That's right.
Yeah, what we have, the system. One has to remember that the system we have now is very far from perfect.
Right. Unless you know and trust the referee
exactly.
to do a good job.
It depends a lot on those sort of webs of trust and acquaintance with people and so on. So
now thinking what you described is very interesting because, and you basically mentioned in your keynote that the models in the recent months got so good that the best models operate at the level of a graduate student, right? At the graduate student, PhD candidate.
At least, I never qualify that, but at least some of the time.
Some of the time.
And I think there may be parts of mathematics where they haven't reached that level, but
right.
And there'll be plenty of problems where, but they can operate at that level if you give them the right questions to do.
Right.
At least.
And basically you said that a lot of, so you're concerned that a lot of low-level work will, students will now delegate to LLMs instead of doing this manually, right? Like a lot of steps that normally they would do manually, they would delegate it, so you're basically worried about that. But I'm just thinking that, like in coding, now everybody uses Cloud Code and similar tools, and nobody.
Yeah.
There was a period of time in ancient history 6 months ago when people questioned that. Now the consensus is that the best developers use AI. It just makes them even better. The rich gets richer, right? Like this is Marxism. So the 10x developers, the magical creatures who are super productive, become even more productive, and juniors getting eliminated because they cannot compete with even a basic LLM. So the question is now, I wonder if lean now becomes approachable because machines can do a lot, right? Like it was impractical for people to do a lot of formalization. Now this will be vibe formalization. Will it now become a tool in a similar fashion for mathematicians, for students? So you will always work alongside lean or something like this, right? So it will not compete. It will be like a coding tool. It will help you, but human is still in charge because a smart computer architect developer, he knows what to ask, and that really makes a difference. Like, can this be the course of mathematics education? So now you will teach with lean from, Math 101. Do you think that's going to happen?
I don't know whether we'll teach with lean because learning lean presents an extra barrier somehow, and the way that you have to do mathematics if you want to do lean is a little bit different from the way you do normal mathematics, a little bit less intuitive in various ways.
Okay.
Or at least that's how it seems, because I've grown up the other way. Maybe
it will be something better than lean.
But maybe a platform that has lean running in the background, but is a bit more sort of user-friendly than lean.
Maybe lean is integrated into LaTeX, and as you write a paper, it gets verified.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you've got some interface, sort of a higher level language that you're using yourself, but lean is verifying what you write as you write, or lean combined with automatic theorem proving tools. That could be, I think we will get to that stage. Although there's a sort of race between people developing a platform like that and just AI getting better and better at maths on its own. So, I mean, a future that it would be very nice would be if we had platforms that made it really easy to do mathematics and have it formalized as you do it, and in other words, sort of tools that just help you think at your screen. And I know a lot of people are interested in developing such tools, including my group in Cambridge, actually. But if you have a really good platform like that, then you can also train an AI system to use the platform. So,
So that will be our ask for developers. If you want to build such a platform, it will have an impact. So maybe, I'll close with the kind of general question, because, I come from Soviet Union, which had very strong math and physics. And a lot of people here come from China or India or France, where they have very strong STEM education, right? And so I think that's why, for instance, there is a question, women in tech, women in science. In America, it's very, much dramatized. But in India, Russia, China, France, there is more balance, women in tech, because everybody gets strong education. And there is no question of somebody not getting math. This is, I think, we're the last generation which were educated without AI. And now, of course, everybody says, you don't need to know anything. AI will solve it for you. So I wonder, and you're at Cambridge, right, like the citadel of academia and tradition. And so how do you see the role of math? So AI is all math, as we know, is all matrices all the way down. But in practical application, there's so much removed now from math that very few people can do the underlying math, right? The actual gradient descent, understanding matrices, it used to be a part of AI education. Now nobody really needs this. People just can ask Cloud Code, right? So I think every year, more and more people in AI have no idea what is the underlying math, how it works. How do you think, it becomes specialized too, like PyTorch, people optimizing for GPUs, they need to know both the math and how quantization works, and it becomes a very specialized tool. So I wonder, as a professor of mathematics, how do you see math kind of as a foundation of science? are we going to be able to preserve it that way? Or is it going to become a very niche area? Or like, how do you see the role of math in education, right? To make the people of tomorrow?
I don't know what's going to happen. I'm a bit worried about that. In fact, I said in my, not in the panel yesterday, there was a discussion about AI in education.
Right.
And I'm worried about this perception that we don't need to know anything because we can outsource all our... So there was somebody, Bill Wren, who said that we can outsource knowledge, but we can't outsource understanding or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's quite true, and I think if we don't have a significant percentage of people in a society who really understand mathematics and at some level, then we will operate, we'll be somehow under the control of these systems. We'll be passive consumers of them, and so that worries me. And I think that may be what happens. On the other hand, I think it will remain the case that people who do make the effort to have a good understanding of mathematics will have a big advantage. A bit like what you were saying earlier about the rich getting richer. If you know how to, if you know maths well, then you'll be better at using AI and using it to do mathematics and having an understanding of what you can use the tools for and so on. So I hope that that message will get through. And,
do you see young people? So you're teaching in France and in Cambridge. Do you see young people coming into math who will make great mathematicians, despite of everything else happening? Like, do you see, like, is there supply of smart young students?
Yeah, well, I'm very lucky to be at Trinity College, Cambridge, and we get regularly incredibly good mathematicians coming there.
So they're still being produced somewhere and get to Trinity.
And for the moment, I think they are still noticeably ahead of what AI can do. The very best students, anyway.
So there is hope. There is hope for the future of math.
There is hope, yes. But yeah, it could go either way. I think we really don't know what's going to happen.
That's great. I mean, it's really great to see that you're doing things with Lean. So what is your goal for the next year? So, if we meet here next year, what do you want to have achieved by this, like in a year with your lab?
Well, I was talking in my keynote a little bit about a platform that my group is developing that would sort of encourage people to produce not just proofs, but proofs that are transparent, so you can see where the ideas come from. So my sort of main short-term hope, maybe what I think of as short-term, but in this world, a year feels like long-term as well, is that this platform will be much more developed and we'll be able to demonstrate that it really is a good way of thinking about how to do mathematics.
This sounds great. So if you are ever in the San Francisco Bay Area, we run AI Meetup there. Please come and give us a talk and do a demo of the platform. We'd like, or send a student to show it. We'd love to play with it. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Yeah.